Bonjour, Anin, Sherry Indigenous. Now what I said was, welcome. Hello, and my name is Sherry. I want to start off by telling you guys, there was this old Indigenous man, okay? He was walking down this dirt road, and he seen this dog. And the dog had a sign around his neck, it was res dog. And it said, talking dog for free. So he went up to that dog and he says, is it true? Can you really talk? And the dog says, oh, not only can I talk, but I've served my country. I teach the kids powwow songs at the elementary school. I even call the bingos at the old folks' home. So this man was like, oh, what an amazing dog. So he goes to the owner's house, knocks on the door, and he says, why would you give away such an incredible dog? And the owner says, nah, because he's a liar and he never did any of those things. It's one of my most favorite jokes to tell. But it wasn't always like that. It was a man on a road and just a dog. So one of my most favorite things to do is take something and indigenize it. It's kind of what I got known for on TikTok. Taking trends, putting an Indigenous spin on it to create something for our community so that we can participate. I grew up during a time where media, movies, TV, even music, we didn't have a huge representation of Indigenous people. And it's not because we didn't want to be there. It's because those spaces weren't always meant for us. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go way back. So I'm an 80s child. And I was raised by my grandmother. And I was growing up in a time where being Indigenous, it wasn't cool. Like how it is on TikTok and in our digital spaces, hashtag Indigenous. It was something that people hid because of how we were treated. And I've seen many times my aunties and my uncles treated unfairly and poorly just because they were Native. But there I was probably one of the lightest skinned Indigenous people in my family. And there I was with feathers in my hair, and I always got heck for that from my aunties and stuff because they knew what could happen to me. We go missing and we're murdered at such a large, alarming rate. And there I was, putting it out there for the world to know that I was Indigenous. My grandmother raised me after she raised 8 of her own kids. So could you imagine raising 8 kids and then having to raise this little one next? So she raised me as a free spirit. And if I wanted to wear cowboy boots and a cowboy hat to school, she let me. If I wanted to wear ballet slippers to gym and run in the gym, she let me. She let me do a lot of the things that she knew I could express myself. And because of those things, that's why I am the person I am today. There was a lot of times where I was super shy, introverted. I don't think I could stand up in front of a crowd and talk about my personal journey. But she taught me, my grandmother, that you never know who you're going to touch. You never know who's going to resonate with you, who's going to relate to your journey, and how that's going to help them. So I had to push myself. So let's go back to representation. Right? Representation is so incredibly important, and not just for Indigenous people, but all people of color and the spaces that we occupy. So when I create content, or even when I consume content, that's where my brain goes, is where's the representation? Where is the BIPOC version of this? And so that's kind of been something that's fueled me creatively the past few years, but it wasn't always like that. I'm a mother of 4, and for the most part, have raised them by myself. We've been in the Seven Oaks community for most of their lives, and I always come back to Seven Oaks. I love it here. My kids go to school here, and I feel like a lot of times it comes full circle for me personally. With my kids being in this environment and being in these schools that I come to, that I talk at. I was at Elwick Community School the other day, talking to the grade 7s and 8s, and talking to them about being an influencer as a career. Super neat, definitely a new industry, had a lot to teach them. But there was that journey coming from my Indigenous perspective as an influencer, because it is different than your average person who is not Indigenous and an influencer. There's a lot of things that I have to take into consideration. And then there's that representation. This has pockets. I was homeless and living in my car about 15 years ago. And that was probably one of the most scariest times of my life, because it was so uncertain. My future was so incredibly uncertain, where I didn't know where I was going to sleep. I was driving around trying to find a safe place to sleep and park my car. My car was full of all of my stuff, and my kids were living in Alberta with their dad. And so there was so much uncertainty in my life, and I needed to pull myself together and find a purpose. Prior to that, I wanted to be a police officer. I worked so hard to try and make that happen. Now, when you grow up in poverty, which I did, it's very hard to have a clear criminal record, just saying. I didn't get in trouble. I got my driver's license when I was older because I only had one relative who drove and had a car. So I had no one to teach me. I was getting all physically fit for the police prep tests. I did everything in my power to try and become a police officer because I thought that's the best way I'm going to protect my people. That's the best way I can be the first point of contact when someone needs me, when another Indigenous person is going to need me. And the closer I got to it, the more I discovered that that's not what happens. And in fact, quite the opposite. But my love for storytelling and comedy brought me to media production. So I attended the Red River College in their creative communications course, which was so hard. It was one of the hardest things I ever did in college, because everything's so go, go, go. And I was the oldest person there, and I had a bunch of old kids, and I just couldn't keep up with the young students. But I learned a lot. And then my cousin says to me one day, "You should do YouTube." I was like, nah, no one wants to see me on YouTube. But then I started YouTube. And I was hustling hard for those followers on YouTube, for those subscribers. And I just felt like I was in this really neat space of storytelling where I got to control everything. I got to navigate the story I wanted to tell, how I wanted to tell it. And I was doing silly stuff that I wanted to do. I wasn't focused on the representation part of it, like I'm an Indigenous person and I am doing my makeup, or I'm going to shop for cat food. I didn't think that there was a need for that. I thought it was very clear. I'm Native and I'm doing makeup. It wasn't. It really wasn't. And it wasn't until a lot of my content was being seen outside of Canada and people had perceptions of what Indigenous people look like. Because I wasn't, two long, beautiful braids on a horse, wind blowing in my hair. Because I didn't look like that. I didn't look like the typical version of what people thought Natives looked like. So I would get a lot of backlash. You're white. You're not Native. Oh yeah, prove it. And I get that. I get that people want to prove, like that they want proof. Especially now. And I'm more than willing to give proof. But it was weird as a creator that just wanted to focus on good stuff and having a good time. But then there was that representation piece where I felt I had a duty to talk about, yeah, there's light-skinned Natives. What do you mean? I can see a bunch of them here tonight. There's all kinds of Natives. We come in all different shapes, shades, and sizes, And I felt like that's kind of something that I needed to start advocating for. So I did, and I did get some backlash. Then I found Musical.ly. There's 2 videos out there of me. Super cringe. So I was on there and I was like checking it out. I was like, okay, this is interesting. But then it transformed to TikTok. And it wasn't just like lip syncing and dancing. And I seen so much potential for there to be creating content for Indigenous representation. So I started creating these sounds that were like trending already, but then putting an Indigenous spin on it. There was one in particular that was like, I just took a DNA test, turns out I'm 100%, and then someone would go, Italian, and then they would show all of their beautiful culture about being Italian. Well, I was like, I didn't know what to say because I'm not 100% anything really. I know I have mixed blood. So I made the sound, I'm 100% Nietzsche. And then I was beating, and I was wearing my mucklucks. I was locking a door with a butter knife. And then I thought, that's fun. And then I deleted the app. And I went back a few months later, and I had 69 followers. I was like, holy heck, I'm not even trying on this thing. And I was hustling away on YouTube. And then I seen that everyone was using, like a bunch of people were using that sound I created. And I was like, they're stealing the sound from me. I didn't know how TikTok worked yet. But that started a fire in me because I seen youth using it. And I seen youth beating and showing their regalia and just being resi. And I loved it. And I was like, we need more of that. We need more of creating these spaces for Indigenous youth to be resi, to be rugged, to be happy, and to feel represented. And so that's one of the reasons why I kind of pushed all of these crazy sounds. And I used a lot of like crazy sounds like Conway Kootenay's, I think you're deadly. That quarantine time lady. There was a lot of sounds that were so familiar to us as Indigenous people that even non-Indigenous people were like, oh, I watched that movie. I seen that. And it was about creating a community and just finding each other through hashtags, through sounds. And now I've taught TikTok twice. TikTok has hired me to teach to Indigenous people from an Indigenous perspective how to make TikToks, how to monetize your TikToks, how to make money from TikTok, and social media altogether. One of the really neat things that kind of put things into perspective for me was when I started getting brand deals. Brand deals from places that, I never thought that I would get a brand deal from. I got a brand deal from Google. I got a brand deal from McDonald's, from HelloFresh, from Hershey's. I was like, never in my wildest dreams would I imagine those things. And one of the things that really put it into perspective for me was when Google flew me and my son out to Toronto for a Raptors game. And I thought to myself, how am I going to still consistently be a representation of an Indigenous woman in these non-Indigenous spaces? I'm going to wear my ribbon skirt. And I wore my ribbon skirt to this Raptors game. And it was one of the first games, after things kind of started lifting, after lockdown and all of the restrictions. And it was like I was walking through this crowd and everyone was parting ways for me, and I was like, it was so exciting. And I don't even think they knew why they were moving for me, but I felt like royalty or something. And it was the impact of the ribbon skirt that I had on everyone there. And so I promise myself now that when I'm in these spaces that aren't specifically Indigenous, that I'm going to wear my ribbon skirt. I'm going to wear my beaded earrings. My grandmother, she had a really neat way with words. And one of the things that she taught me, because she had such a hard time navigating this world, her dad was from Iceland. He's Swedish. And her mom was Soto Ojibwe. He's 6'4" something. She's 4'9". Neither of them could speak English. I have no idea how they hooked up and had my grandma and all of my aunties and uncles. But they did, right? And so my grandma always had this internal dialogue inside of her where, sure, she's Indigenous, but she also has this other piece of her that she needs to honor as well. So she taught me how to walk in both worlds. She taught me when to wear pearls and when to wear beads. And even though I know all of these things, 100%, I prefer to wear beads. Now I want to leave you guys with a little quote. Because I think identity and representation is so incredibly important. And sometimes it's hard for us. Sometimes there's going to be someone that's going to try and push you down. There's going to be people that aren't going to want to hear what you have to say. And that's okay. Maybe it's not for them. We don't need to focus on who doesn't want to hear us, who doesn't want to see us. We need to focus on those who are there for, who are cheering us on, who are going to come to every show, who are going to share every post and like everything and be there to support you. So to this, I say, always speak your truth, even if your breath stinks. It's supposed to be voice shakes, but I like breath stinks instead. So thank you guys so much for coming to my TED Talk.